the nature of free speech changed after the advent of the internet?
I don't know if the nature of free speech itself changed, but maybe the way we think of free speech and whether our kind of traditional and historical ways of thinking of free speech may have changed. And so I think, for example, that if I can get a little bit academic here. So John Stuart Mill in his piece on liberty talks about three reasons that we want to have free speech. And one is that we might not be right. I mean, right? Like we need diversity of opinion because we don't know, we want to figure out which one is true. And so my own opinion might not be right. And so I need to hear other views. Another reason is we might be partly right, but then the other side might be partly right, right? So we might have some kernel of truth, but that sort of probably one person doesn't have access to the whole and complete truth. And again, like we're fallible in our beliefs, right? We might believe some things that are false. And so challenging that can be useful. And then another is even if we are right, that we might want like challenges so that like our beliefs don't just sort of harden and ossify into dogma, right? Like we want to just like always be keeping those ideas alive and resonant and all of this. So John Stuart Mill was like a big proponent of free speech, but even for him, it wasn't absolute, right? You can't like you do speech that harms, like that it's going to cause like physical harm to someone, like inciting a riot, or something like that. And so I think the question is, and so, free speech is really valuable for in a liberal society, in a liberal democracy like ours. But the question is now that we have like social media, in some way it's a great technology for free speech, right? And all of us, can have a voice. All of us can speak one to many, many to many. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And so there are some really good features about social media, for democracy. On the other hand, though, we've obviously seen, like maybe abuses of that free speech where now fringe groups can be, their voices can be amplified where they might not have reached very many people before. Now they have a platform where they can reach many people, and we see like a rise in extremism, right? Because these people can find each other. And we see a rise, we see hate speech and we see bullying and misinformation, right?
Misinformation, yes.
And so I think, right, people are starting to question, like, we do want free speech, but does like sort of this very strong, view like Mill's on free speech, does that still like really work in our society today? Are sort of the harms that can be caused by these things like misinformation and hate speech and extremism, does that call for some kind of content moderation, right? And if these platforms are sort of in effect like our public square, right, where we exchange ideas, then do we need to have some kind of guardrails on that? It's a tough question, right? And then, the companies are private companies, so they can kind of make their own, legally, they can make their own policies. But, it raises questions then about their power to control, the type of speech that people are having and who's making these decisions. How do you make these decisions, especially given the huge volume of speech, right? We have tons and tons of speech.
I feel like after the printing press, like newspapers became a thing, and that created the idea of the freedom of the press. Do you think something similar to that for social media, like Twitter or something, would be not legalized, but like established as a new law or like new idea where there's a different version of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, but applied to that kind of technology? Or do you think there's a necessity for it?
Like a different, sorry, can you repeat that?
So after the printing press, that technology, you have the newspaper.
Right.
So there's freedom of the press is a new idea that developed after that. Do you think something like that will happen with social media? Where it's like a variation of freedom of speech?
Right. I think we've probably got the basic framework. I mean, but if you're talking about sort of how, the technology of the printing press, right? This makes print culture like widely accessible to, where only clergy, had access to scripture, right? Like had access to the Bible. And so people had to just trust what the clergy was saying. But now they could read it for themselves, right? And that makes a huge difference. And that's really good, right? Because people can kind of see it themselves and make their own judgments. And so, right, and then, right, you have the free press. I think that, there are, like, in terms of journalism, right, there are some laws around, what a newspaper can print. Actually, more so than I think, them getting into waters that I'm not, like, expert on. But, right, but the press, the free press has a duty to try to report factually. You can't libel people, you can't slander people. And so, right, there's like FCC regulations, about political ads and campaigns, right? So I don't know, maybe do we need something, this is a big debate, right? Do we need something like that for social media? Do we need some kind of government regulation for social media companies? I don't know. My own view is that you should be very hesitant to curb speech, but you can make the argument too that, if certain platforms are so like toxic and people could be psychologically harmed by them, or feel that, or whose voices are chilled,
or spread disinformation.
It's I don't have a perfect position on this. I think you should be very hesitant to chill free speech, but in some cases I think it's getting so, right, there are questions of public harm, right? So like with the coronavirus, people could be harmed physically by misinformation about the coronavirus. And so the companies did start to label it or tag it, right? Things like that. But then, right, there's like blowback even from that, because then for some groups, like getting some kind of label or flag, it would be a sign that, oh, you should believe this, right? Let's spread this one, right? It was like it was motivating them the wrong way. So there's no there's no like neutral, I don't think there's like a neutral position, because even labeling, I think, you're putting your thumb on
you're touching it, yeah.
Right, on the scale.
What do you think of, I think Elon Musk, after he bought Twitter and he made it into X, a major reason he did that was because he felt that, he needed to like protect freedom of expression, stuff like that. And he stated in his policy that freedom of speech will be protected, but freedom of reach wouldn't be protected. So some ideas that were expressed, if they don't align with the policy, then they might not receive the boost with the algorithm. What do you think of that?
Yeah, right. So I know Elon claims he's a free speech absolutist, right? I don't think he actually is, because he is doing these kinds of things, right? He's kicking people off of the platform. He's changing, right? He's making it so you can't block posts. I don't know if if he walked that back, right? He is promoting, right, people with the blue check who are paying for it. So this is not, and at Tesla, Tesla has fired employees for speaking out against like harassment and things like that. So I don't think he actually is a free speech absolutist. I think it's maybe a little free speech for me, but not for thee. So the algorithms that, right, he's making decisions about speech. He's not just saying this is like an open forum for all, right? And because those algorithms are not just neutral, and none of the platform's algorithms are neutral, right? You're going to either promote this kind of post or you're going to promote that kind of post, right? And or I don't know, you're going to do it randomly, and then that's a choice too. All of those have like implications for speech.